Joining us now, NBC News White House correspondent Vaughn Hilliard, MSNBC legal analyst and former U.S. Attorney Joyce Vance, and senior writer at The Dispatch, David Drucker. Vaughn, nothing from the White House today. That's interesting.
There's quietness, and our colleagues have written a report in which this White House's tact is one now to not comment on the ongoing Epstein revelations and investigations and efforts to disclose additional files. At the same time, the number two at the Department of Justice, Todd Blanche, Donald Trump's former defense attorney, is actively in Tallahassee, to our understanding, still at this current moment meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell. Of course, this is happening in private confines. This is not happening at the jail. It's happening at the federal courthouse there. And it is not clear whether the Department of Justice will release a transcript of his meeting with Ghislaine Maxwell or what evidence or what testimony they will choose to provide to the American public. And, of course, whether Ghislaine Maxwell is to be trusted in this situation or not, or is she looking for a reduced prison sentence, for instance. The president, for his part, he's been posting on social media about effectively everything but this, which is natural. He is the president of the United States. And yet there are still, we are learning more in real time about the relationship of Jeffrey Epstein and Donald Trump, and the fact that Jeffrey Epstein was at his wedding in 1993 with Marla Maples. We are learning that in the case of how their relationship ended, there are still serious questions. The White House has insisted that Donald Trump was the one, Katie, that cut off the relationship because he determined that Epstein was a crook. But in a conversation that I had with Mark Epstein, the brother of Jeffrey Epstein, in his tellings, he said that his brother Jeffrey told him that he was the one that cut off the relationship between the two men, the long-standing friendship, because he had determined that Donald Trump was a crook. There are still a lot more questions about that relationship, not necessarily criminal in nature, but one about just how much Donald Trump knew
just
about
one
Jeffrey Epstein.
Clarification, Vaughn, was it the White House saying that Donald Trump got rid of Jeffrey Epstein because he was a creep or a crook?
A creep. That he got rid of Jeffrey Epstein because he was a creep. And Mark Epstein, the brother, tells me that Jeffrey was the one that ended it because he determined that Donald Trump was a, quote, crook. All
right. Just want to make sure that that's clear. Joyce, the interview right now with Ghislaine Maxwell in the prison, she's got a live appeal going. She wants to get out of prison. She doesn't believe she had a fair trial. How does that, or does that, complicate this interview?
Everything about this interview is complicated, Katie, because the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, the number 2 guy at the Justice Department, doesn't just insert himself in a situation and go interview a potential witness. In fact, if you're going to have anybody do it, that would be the line prosecutor who conducted the case. But they can't do that in this case because they've fired Maureen Comey, who prosecuted this case. There's a step back, more fundamental question, which is why are they talking to her at all? DOJ has already come out with a July 6 memo that says there's no one left to be prosecuted. And so we're left with the real sense that this is the president's former lawyer having a little, tete-a-tete with this woman to see what she might say, what she could say, what she maybe won't say. And it really smacks of politics. This is not how DOJ conducts its business.
Let me play a little bit of the 2010 deposition by federal investigators with Jeffrey Epstein. This is on his relationship with Donald Trump.
Have you ever had a personal relationship with Donald Trump?
What do you mean by personal relationships?
Have you socialized with him?
Yes, sir.
Yes?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever socialized with Donald Trump in the presence of females under the age of 18?
Though I'd like to answer that question, at least today, I'm going to have to assert my 5th, 6th, and 14th Amendment rights, sir.
David, how is this stuff playing? I can see how it's playing with lawmakers because I can see the moves they're making, the Republican moves. But how is it playing with their constituents?
Well, we don't have any data yet, Katie, to show that it's playing negatively. I think voters, Republican voters in particular, and you can divide them into buckets, right? I mean, you've got the MAGA wing of the Republican Party. They've been concerned with this and other conspiracies, and I think this matters to them to some degree. But they have a habit of absolving Trump of responsibility and then laying the blame at the feet of other Republicans. And I think that's why you've seen House and Senate Republicans, House Republicans in particular, because all of them are up for re-election and have primaries next year, of being more aggressive on this matter than the White House. The president's not up for re-election again, let alone next year. And then I think sort of the broader Republican electorate is more focused on things like, the economy and whether or not the president is handling foreign policy and trade policy and things like that in a manner that they would prefer. I think that the best way to understand this is that voters tend to sort of follow the president's lead when it comes down to it. And so if he tells them there's not much to worry about, then they tend to go in that direction, at least as it concerns him. And so to the extent that this is a problem, it becomes a problem for Republicans in Congress who always end up with the blame for the troubles that Donald Trump has from their point of view.
I think that's interesting. I do still have the question of, if Donald Trump has that base of support that is unmoving, why is he so defensive about this? Why is he calling the Wall Street Journal to get a story like he sent Jeffrey Epstein a birthday note squashed, according to reporting? Why is he, talking about Obama and Clinton and Russia? I mean, he is really trying to reach for old standby distractions. The Atlantic has called it desperate. Why is he behaving this way if this is not a concern for him?
Well, I don't think it's a major political concern for him, but I think he thinks it's a concern for him. And I also think that this is just who he is. I interviewed him some years back when he was trying to get Liz Cheney expelled from Republican leadership. She was still in the House of Representatives at that time and the number 3 ranking House Republican. And just go with me here for a second. I asked him, I said, what do you care if Liz Cheney doesn't like you? You were the president of the United States. He was out of office at this time. The most powerful political office on the face of the earth. And so a member of Congress doesn't like you. Who cares? And I thought he might have some strategic answer. Well, listen, there's a method to my madness and this, that, and the other. And all he said is, I just don't like it. I think Donald Trump just doesn't like these sorts of things. I think he takes offense to them. He thinks it's a problem. And so he fights them, and he tries to send people down to the rabbit holes claiming victimhood. It's just what he does. I also think he's most comfortable that way. And so how he views these things are different than I think even how a lot of voters view these things.
Okay, Vaughn, is that the way you assess it as well? And I wonder if there's not a concern about the diehard MAGA base, and I understand that. I mean, I've witnessed it myself. I know that it's very difficult to displace that support. What about the latecomers to the MAGA party, the ones who don't have the same level of devotion, the Joe Rogans, the Theo Vaughns, those sorts of people who were demanding Epstein transparency, but aren't necessarily, the type of people that are going to get in line 9 hours early at a rally because they're desperate to see Donald Trump?
Right. I think the 2 layers to that. One, I think David is absolutely spot on. The president has a very clear public history of being sensitive to matters that would either implicate him or suggest that he is somehow emotional to the suggestions that he associates with people who have a history of impropriety. For example, I go back in 2023. It was days before he was indicted in the hush money charges in New York. I asked him a very specific question, saying, it seems like you're frustrated, and based off of your social media posts, which were in all caps at the time, and he cut me off and said, who said I'm frustrated? I'm not frustrated. And there was another interaction that a colleague of ours had with him in the Oval Office just earlier this spring. There was another suggestion that he was frustrated, and he does not like that suggestion. And so I think in this situation here, there is so much attention and scrutiny, and unlike the last 10 years, coming from within his own party. And frankly, we have not seen him really take this head on in a meaningful way in front of the cameras. He's had less press availability here in the last days. And I think that he knows that he would face more questions about his relationship with somebody that, by all accounts, and he says himself, has a history that is going to be remembered as one of disgrace. And when it comes to his supporters, look, I think when you're looking at the people like the Joe Rogans, these are folks that came on board perhaps late and had higher expectations of the president. But I don't know, objectively speaking, based off of our reporting in the history of Donald Trump, whether you should always take him at his word that he is going to deliver on promises that he makes on the campaign trail.